Awesome. Well, Gio, thanks so much for coming on the show today. Appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, man. And I thought an interesting place to start. Like, I'm a big combat sports fan. I saw you went to the UFC in Sydney the other week. How was that?
Do you know what? I've only been to 2, and I was lucky enough to go to the UFC in Perth in Feb. It's amazing when you go, but the atmosphere in Perth was electric, where Sydney was good, but it wasn't the same in some ways. I thought it was really interesting, but regardless, an amazing experience. Some really interesting fights. Some were over pretty quick as well. Did you watch?
I did watch it. Yeah.
I actually just saw Jack Jenkins before, and he's healing up nice as well. So he'll be back soon. But it was a bit of fun, definitely.
That's awesome, man. Yeah. Have you always been into kind of like combat sports or martial arts, or is it more of a recent thing?
I mean, I did karate when I was about 9 for about 6 weeks.
Yeah,
so it's a good start.
I feel like we all did that back in the day.
You know, if you talk to the people around me, I'm a lover. Never been in a fight in my life, but it's probably in the last few years. I think Conor McGregor did it to a lot of people, where they drew them into the sport. But it's interesting because a lot of my friends growing up, they loved footy, and it's just not my thing. Like I watch it, I'll enjoy it, but it's just not what I get drawn to. And then once I started watching the UFC quite a bit, you know, I realized I enjoyed the technical side. I enjoyed how it's all put together, and it's really entertaining sport for me. So yeah, I've kind of leaned into it more, and I'm lucky now I've got a few friends who also kind of follow it. So you've got someone to watch it with or talk to it about. But yeah, again, not super religious, but I don't mind a bit of
I think it's funny because like I love combat sports, but I don't religiously follow the UFC, same as you. But I think this was the first one because I was actually in Canada at the time with my business partner who does follow it religiously. And so like we watched all like the preamble and like all the build up, and it was the first time I'd really kind of like followed the stories.
It is interesting, isn't it? Yeah.
I think that's what they do such a good job of. It's not just the fight.
Storytelling of it all as well. And I think sometimes, you know, every weight division goes through this, and at some point where it gets really stacked and there's a lot of good fighters at one time. And then there's, you know, the shit talkers, you know, Strickland, you know, I can't even believe he won to begin with, but you know, he kind of says it how it is. And I think that's what also draws you to it as well, where in Australian sports, you know, when they're in front of the camera, they're very conservative with how they talk and their thoughts and their opinions. And it might be because, you know, it's very easy to get cancelled here. Where did you hear some of the post-fight when what the guy called, I can't say it, but he referred to him, and one fighter referred to the other fighter's team and crew as not a nice comment, that if anyone said that in this country would be absolutely prosecuted. But it's just normal for that kind of sport and that environment as well.
Yeah, which is probably in a way why I think it's so appealing, especially to Australians, because you don't see that as much.
It's ruthless. Yeah, it's enjoyable.
100%.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. But Gio, you've done a lot of amazing things. Obviously, you're co-founder of Sourci. You work on a number of other projects I know at the moment, and really keen to kind of dive in and hear a bit more about your background, your story, because I think what you've done and kind of the way you approach it. Obviously, knowing you for a few years, it's really incredible. So, I guess we'd love to kind of start at the start.
Where it started.
Just even before Sourci, you know.
Even me,
yourself. Like, you know, what was your kind of background? Like, were you always kind of entrepreneurial, or was that a later thing?
I think you over time you grow and you get to know yourself a bit better, and you can look back and reflect as well on how you used to see yourself. You know, I know I've done well, but when I was younger, I could never have pictured to be where I am. And I think a big part of that was, you know, school wasn't, I didn't exceed, I didn't do well, I didn't take it seriously. You know, and I struggled with that because, and this isn't the reason why it was so difficult, but I found out later in life when I was 22 that I'm actually dyslexic. When you don't know that and you go into a public school and you struggle with reading and writing, you know, and you're getting poor marks, you know, you lose a lot of confidence in yourself as well. So when I lost that, I kind of said, all right, well, school's not for me. And I did it half-assed, and I continued to do it half-assed. And I was lucky to finish, and I finished year 12. I went and got a job working with my friends in a big printing company, and we used to print like billboards, banners, all that kind of stuff. Again, dead-end job. Used to work from 3 p.m. till 1 in the morning. Spent all my money on partying and all the things you shouldn't do. But I had no ambition. I had no direction. I didn't really think much of myself at that time as well. And that was a few years of life. And then, I eventually said, all right, what else can I do? Because I started looking, I always had an interest in marketing, but when you're on Seek and it says you need a 4-year degree and then you're going to make $70,000 a year, and this is 10 years ago and there's nothing wrong with $70,000 a year, but I was just like, fuck, I can't wait 4 years to take that jump. So I asked friends, what would I be good at? The feedback was I was, good at sales. Maybe I could be good at sales, even though it was unproven. So the only company that would hire me for sales was another printing company because, I at least had somewhat of a background. So I went and joined the printing company and I sucked. Best word for it is I sucked. I couldn't make sales to save my life. I think the way they brought me in as well wasn't great and I get it's old school sales tactic, but they put a phone book down in front of me and they just said, start calling businesses. And I understand it's good to get you on the phones, everything else, but you're rarely going to make any sales that way, cold calling, reaching out in that sense when, in some ways we weren't that competitive in what we offered. Mm-hmm. But I stuck it out and I think they tried to fire me twice, but I just survived. And I was working with this big caravan client at the time and I was trying to get him to order and he was going to place an order that would be my whole budget for about 2 months in one order. And my boss was like, it's never going to happen. But eventually I kept investing in this guy and, we built a good relationship. He ended up placing the order. And the day that the deposit was made, my boss at the time came and put my business cards on my desk and he said, all right, you've made it now. And then it's almost like something switched when that happened. And I went from not being able to figure it out to figuring it out really well. And I, started to exceed and I broke a lot of the targets that were there as well, which is good. So in a year I went from struggling to doing well. And I used to sit on the retail side of the business. So I'd service, businesses who need printing products. But a guy who worked adjacent to me actually took on the other side of the business, which is trade. So we used to help other printers when they didn't have the same products, whatever else, and they could use our services. They took us away for our Christmas party and they flew us to Sydney. It was a great company. And I just said to him, have you ever thought about doing this for yourself? And then 2 weeks later, we both resigned and we started our first company, which was Allied Print. But what kind of gave me confidence in it, and it kind of leads into Sourci, is what I saw in that business blew my mind, which was front-facing. When you look at the company, it was a printing company, right? It looked like an Australian printing company. Really, it was Chinese-owned, and they had these these shop fronts or stores or business centers in different countries. But really, they were printing everything in like 3 days and airframing it over. So quicker than what you could do locally. They're printing them in a factory overseas, getting them on a DHL air freight service and getting them here in a week. And it just blew my mind. It opened my mind up to like, wow, you can actually, not only just produce overseas, but you can turn around in a week. And they had it down at like a formula. So when we started our business, my old business partner, Clem, we kind of knew that it was really possible to just develop and manufacture products overseas, even though we didn't have the resources, connection, or anything else, but we just knew that it worked. So we did that business for about 5 years, and it was very much a lifestyle business. It was him and I, no employees. He took care of his clients, I took care of mine. Our niche was we figured out that marketing managers wanted to centralize all their printing through one supplier because it's less work for them. We can set up their artwork, makes life easier. So we just went after marketing managers, and we worked with some really incredible brands. We continued to work in that caravan industry. We got to travel to China a few times. It was the first time I was there, but again, I look back now and I was a kid, going there thinking I'm meeting a factory and I'm sitting with a trading company But a lot of lessons were learned in that business as well of, products coming wrong, not understanding how to work out your true prices of your products, not knowing how to import products, not knowing how to read a freight quote, set up artwork. But I think, even if it was a lifestyle business, being self-employed at 21 and managing that business for 5 years, you do learn a lot of skills, even if it's the hard way, invoicing, following up clients of payment, making sure that you're lodging your BAS on time, making sure that you're not trading insolvently, which can happen. And it was good, but that was that chapter.
Yeah, so incredible. And this is something that I'm really interested to dive into a little bit deeper, is because I think you mentioned at the start, you said you discovered later on in life you were dyslexic and that was really made you struggle at school. And then in that sales job, you almost got fired twice because you weren't hitting your targets initially. But I'm just really curious, have you thought about that on reflection of Because I feel like it's easy to kind of like go on a path of like downward momentum where you feel like you don't know the reasons why. It's like, hey, I'm struggling at school. Hey, I'm almost getting fired from the sales job. I must just be a loser. And that's sometimes the path you can go down. So how did you kind of turn that the other way?
It's a good question. I think, I think I did have a few not good things happen. I worked for everything that I've had, but I think if things didn't sometimes go the way that they have, I could probably be in a different situation. I think that sometimes when you're really interested in something, you're passionate about something, all those other things that would hold you back don't maybe hold you back. And, I always had a desire of understanding how business works or wanting to run my own business, or even just little things when someone will talk to me about, a shop or whatever it might be. I'd be like, I wonder how much that makes. I wonder what that costs. And I think that desire of wanting would kind of fuel me to want to be better in certain ways as well. I mean, I still struggled with a lot of self-confidence issues for a while. I just think that I lent into the skills that I had, which was I'm very personable. I can connect with people. I understand some business side of it at a younger age as well, how to make money, how to make margins, whatever it might be. So I think, I just kind of my natural desire and leaning into the skills that I did have allowed me to kind of just gain a bit of confidence over time. Now I don't look at the dyslexia part as like a negative in my life. I'm actually grateful for it because it's known that people with dyslexia are very good communicators and very good storytellers as well, and I'm just grateful that I was able to lean into it. But being 22 and sitting at a woman's house when she's testing you, and it's actually a test that she does for children. So you're sitting at a table that's this high from the ground with Play-Doh all over it, and she's asking questions while you're playing with it is a bit of a surreal experience. And she goes at the end of it, she goes, yep, you're definitely dyslexic. And she gave me a few books. But I think I think there's something in what you said where it's really powerful to understand who you are and being accepting of it. And if there's parts you want to change, work on it. And if there's parts that you can lean into that make you kind of more who you are or lean into your strengths, I definitely recommend doing that as well.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I love what you said, and it's so true. It's like we need to know who we are and what our strengths are so we can double down on them and love the whole part, like you said, it's like the dyslexia is obviously a challenge, but then there was other benefits that came from that. And it's just kind of like breaking the two apart and seeing the good and the bad and then just working through them.
Exactly. I don't read contracts even now. It's just not in me to do it because one, I'll get it wrong or misread it. And two, it's not my strength, so I'll struggle with it. And I think that's why I got really lucky with Ellie as a business partner, because he's the opposite, right? He is in the details, very kind of analytical in some ways, but can sometimes, if he listens to this, I love him, but I've got to say it, he can miss the empathetic side and connecting with people in some ways, not like from a client perspective, perfect, but sometimes a team or whatever it is, it can be a bit too direct. And I think that's a skill set that I lean into, and he lets me own that part of what we do.
Yeah, 100%. And that's so key as well, finding that complementary skill set in a co-founder, I guess, which kind of leads into what you're working on the Sourci. And yeah, would love to just kind of understand the journey, because again, you kind of like teed it up, and it sounds like with that printing business, Allied Printing, where, you are seeing this opportunity of, like manufacturing, in this case, printing products overseas, bringing them in, and also seeing the challenges of dealing with these trading companies and just the whole supply chain issue, which is a lot of landmines to navigate. So yeah, we'd just love to kind of understand how that kind of led into Sourci initially.
So to continue on, I guess, from where I was, so we had that printing company for about 5 years, and I still have a really healthy relationship with my old business partner. Him and I were like very good friends. But we just wanted different things. I wanted to build a team and invest and everything else. He wanted it to be a business that made a lot of money, because that's the difference, right? You're either going to reinvest now and hopefully make more later on, or you can just take the profits as they come. And for his reasons, which I totally understand, he wanted to keep the business the way it was. But and I look back now, and I don't know if it was ego or maybe just wanting to feel fulfilled, but I always wanted to have an office. I wanted to always have a team. I always wanted to create that environment. I didn't like working from home by myself 5 days a week. I think my partner at the time could tell that I needed to get out of the house a bit, because I'd wait for her to get home. And that was my interaction some days. And me being an empathetic and social person and love to communicate, it's just not good to be locked in a room. For me anyway. Some people it's perfect. So I knew I wanted to do something else. And I think sometimes my subconscious is a lot stronger than I give it credit for, because, you know, I didn't say today I want to go start a business, but I think I started putting myself in situations where I could discover them. So we went to the Melbourne Accelerator Program, MAP, the alumni, their night where they've already allocated the funds to which businesses they're selecting. Now it's their pitch night to everyone else in the audience. And we're sitting there listening to it, and I was going, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then I listened to one business, and I thought, oh, okay, that's interesting. And then in the car ride home, I said to my partner, like, picture a business. And then I started kind of lightly describing Sourci. So I kind of got, like, you know, inspired from being there. And when I first initially pitched it to her, it was more like a marketplace. It was like picture Alibaba, but for the West. So more verified suppliers, you know, more suppliers from around the world. And I still think there's a potential for that business to exist. I'm not ever going to do it. It's too much money and too much work. But you know, that was my idea. And what happened was I went to, you know, I started writing down the name Sourci on a whiteboard, everything like that. And then I went to one of the guys that was actually one of the mentors in the MAP program, because they allow you to kind of use those resources. I never went to the university, but they allowed me to catch up with him for an hour. Funny enough, he built a marketplace in the US. And he pretty much just sat me down and said, listen, he goes, unless you've got $100 million and, you know, a lot of experience, this business is going to be impossible. And obviously it's brutal to hear that. But he was right. He was bang on right.
Saved you 100 mil.
Yeah, if I had it. But I left there and I thought, okay, well, if I can't build that version of the business, what other version can I do? So I thought the way I'll learn so I can educate myself is I'll just be like, you know, I'll help people find and source manufactured products. And I mapped out the first kind of what the process looked like. I took it to a few friends, and one of them was interested, because I didn't want to do it alone. I know that that's another thing. I don't ever want to own a business by myself. I like having people to be on the journey with. And one friend got involved, and he said, you know, you should really get Ellie, my business partner, involved, my now business partner. And I didn't really know Ellie, and I said, nah, let's not do it. You know, I don't really know him. But Ellie and I went to school together. Funny enough, Ellie starts coming to, you know, we start working out of my house. Ellie's got his own job. I'm still doing my printing company. My friend's doing his own thing. And after about 2 months, my friend goes, hey, listen, it's just not for me. I can't do it. He didn't have that entrepreneurial spirit. He wanted to work. That's all good. That's his life. But Ellie stayed around. So then it became Ellie and I. And then, you know, eventually we both quit. You know, I stepped out of the printing company. I gave my equity to my business partner at the time. And then Ellie finished up at his job at Metricon. And then we started Sourci. And you know, the problem with it was we oversimplified. I thought I knew how to develop and manufacture products, right? Because I had been able to be able to make a flag, or, you know, in China with prints on it, or I was able to get a water bottle. When you're talking proper product development, like you're going through tooling and molding, or you're sourcing a product that's more complicated, even apparel, we were out of our depths, but we'd already started the business by then. So it was a really slow burn. You know, for the first 2.5 years of the business, we probably brought on a handful of clients. We spent most days learning, so we'd go online, Google, you know, what's FOB mean, what are Incoterms. You know, we're interviewing people we'd find on Upwork in China to be our sourcing person over there, and we're kind of just like really painfully building an ugly agency. But we got through the first few years. We started getting a little bit of traction, but it wasn't ever like a really like money generating business straight away. It was like a labor of love for the first few years. That's kind of how it started.
What's procured.co?
That was that. Well, yeah, we tried our hands at a few things. We're like, we're not sourcing, we're procurement. We do more than the sourcing. We do the whole procurement. But I think we were just two uneducated people. So we tried to start a whole new business that was like a next version of Sourci, but we just stopped once we realized like we need to actually understand what our real product offering is.
Yeah, it's so interesting, and I'm just so curious, like where was your mindset at during those 2 years? Because it sounds like, you know, I heard you say in another interview, you like to just kind of say yes and then figure shit out, which I think is like a great kind of like lens to take. But like, how did you kind of like have the confidence to do that? Or, you know, when you were trying all these different things and trying to figure everything out, nothing was clicking, like where was your head at?
There were days where I'd be in the shower Ellie would be on his way over because we used to work out of my house, and we'd have maybe 1 or 2 staff by then. I was like, this is the day I'm going to tell him that I don't want to do the business anymore because nothing was working. We weren't making money. Like, I was stressed because we're not making money. My other source of money stopped. He's not making money. He's gone into credit card debt. And honestly, if I didn't have him as a business partner, I probably wouldn't have worked. That's the truth. Maybe it would have been a different outcome, but it wouldn't be where it is now. Because I'd go downstairs and he'd just be ready. He'd want to take on the day. He's like full beans energy, super positive. And then, you know, that day would go by and it'd be a little bit better. And then you come back and you keep building at it and building at it. And I think it's something really true with, like, you know, how they say you're an overnight success, but they didn't see the first 5 years. Sometimes overnight success doesn't mean you make millions. It can be you go from not being able to pay yourself to being able to pay yourself, right? That to us was like overnight success when we won one job that allowed us, you know, 50 or 60K of profit in it, that allowed us to start paying ourselves, you know. So there was little moments where it would build and build and build and build, and then you'd have a win. And then that would be the kind of baseline of where we are. But yeah, we went through all of that and we finally got a little bit of momentum, and then COVID hit. That kind of changed everything again for us as well.
Yeah, keen to understand that point, because I do believe that was a bit of a turning point for the business. But I think it's just really interesting, and I'd love to just kind of like highlight what you just said around, you know, like, again, people can look at you now and sort of see the results you've got, and they could think, great, he's like a phenomenal entrepreneur, must have always been kind of easy, and he's kind of like set it all up and it's great. But I really do believe it. It's like sometimes it's just sometimes the challenge is you just got to get through that one day, and you got to do that enough times that then you actually have the chance to let all these things kind of fall into place. And just surviving for long enough is sometimes like half the challenge.
Well, you said it before when we were setting up with the podcast. It's like, you know, if you do anything for long enough, you're going to get better at it. And that's certainly true in most areas of business. Like, you know, once you start reading a P&L for the first time versus the, you know, 500th time, you're going to notice some differences. You're going to be able to read it better. You're going to be able to interpret the business better. Where all those things you don't know for the first time can be almost overwhelming.
Yes, very much so. Do you think anyone can, like, I guess, learn that grit, or do you think some people have and some people don't? Or
I think some people don't need to have it. You know, some people are smart enough or have the right connections but develop a really particular skill set that they can leverage. Some people just need to work really hard every day. And I'm not the smartest person. I don't have any unique skill sets. You know, I'm not special in those ways. But I think that the one thing Ellie and I do have is we're just happy to keep working and working hard, and I guess leveraging, you know, that is our skill set and turning that into what works for us.
Yeah, phenomenal. And it's a phenomenal skill set to have. I think you need that definitely in business, that grit. So that's amazing. So yeah, tell me about what happened during COVID, because I don't know if this was the exact timing, but I believe there was 1 year, you know, like 2019, where I think you did like about $1 million in revenue, and then the next year, 2020, you sort of jumped to 43. So can you just tell me about, I guess, like that initial COVID period, and then?
So yeah, we just kind of found our feet. We were working, just finished working out of my house. So we went from the business came with me to 3 different houses. And I had really good housemates at the time. They'll come home, there'd be 4 or 5 people working out their kitchen, you know, with desks set up everywhere. But that's what we did. We put everything back in the business, hired more staff, like, you know, tried to grow it that way. And we finally had that big deal where we made about 80K profit. Everything's good. We look like we're going to have our first $1 million year. I think this is our 2nd year of business as well. So, you know, still not slow growth, but not anything special. And we just signed a lease for an office in Yarra Street in South Yarra. And, you know, we're still trying to save. I remember it. I look back now and actually it's like nostalgic in some ways, where, you know, we were painting the walls ourselves. We were going on Marketplace and finding people giving away furniture for free. And it was fun, you know, you're kind of doing all these exciting things for the first time. And I'm really glad that was my experience as well. Like, it wasn't, and there's nothing wrong with it. It's not like it was brand new everything, best of everything. It was kind of like, you know, you enjoy the fact that you're still kind of hustling, and, you know, you're still trying to prove it at that point. But we moved into this office in South Yarra, painted the walls, put up all this secondhand furniture. It started to look kind of nice. And the weekend we were allowed to move in was actually the day Dan Andrews announced the lockdowns. And where the office was, it looked over South Yarra Station, right? So you'd see the station every morning, bustling, right? People going to and from work, and then empty, like completely empty. And I remember sitting there, and Ellie and I's desks were kind of next to each other, and they looked over the station. And I just remember turning to him and going, "What are we going to do now?" And it's, you know, the one thing that that really helped us was what I lent into once the business started to work was paid advertising. So, you know, we tried a whole bunch of different ways to find clients. We tried, you know, email reach out and all this kind of stuff. Just didn't work. I think our offering wasn't completely right at the time, but people just didn't want it. But when we'd run ads and it would be like China manufacturer, you might get someone saying they want to make t-shirts, everything else. And those were the leads that worked. So we used to get maybe 10 leads a day, whatever it might be. And then all of a sudden the leads started to change, you know, over that period of time. So I went from a t-shirt manufacturer to sanitizer or masks. And one weekend we sold like $500,000 of hand sanitizer to a few pharmacies. And it was like life-changing. And it still is, right? And high-fiving, definitely, you know, getting excited. And then the next week it went from like hand sanitizer to inquiries for like 5 million masks, 10 million masks, 100 million gowns, 1 billion gloves. All of a sudden you're talking to private equity, you're talking to like these big companies, these big players in America and here. And we were lucky that, you know, one thing that Ellie and I can do really well is build relationships. And I built a relationship with a guy who knew a lot about masks, medical equipment. And him and I would just jump on the phone and he'd teach me about filtration efficiency and everything else. So when we started getting these inquiries, you know, we were able to actually kind of show that we understood the product and understood the knowledge. And what had happened was the government had announced a state of emergency, and in all of Australia was, the whole world was. But what it means is they don't actually have to go out to tender to award contracts. So they were going to their preferred and known suppliers of 10 years of masks and medical equipment and going, here's 50 million masks for the national stockpile that you need to provide us. Here's the specs to it, like go and get it. And the problem with that was those healthcare companies, they had their suppliers overseas, but the whole world was in a state of emergency. So when they finally got the orders from the government and went to their factory, the ambassador of France would be in there saying, I'm going to buy your supply chain or the next 6 months worth of stock. And then they were kind of left in this position of, okay, well, we have these purchase orders from the government. Our current suppliers can't fulfill them. We can't get on a flight to go over there and find new factories. Lucky enough, they would Google China manufacturer and then Sourci would come up.
All that SEO paid off at that point.
Exactly right. That was the multi-million-dollar ticket. But that kind of opened the door to us kind of being in this unique position of, because we had a registered office. And that's the other thing that we did from the start is we wanted to own the assets of the business. So we wanted to have a team over there. That's our team that's employed by us. And we did have that. We had about 6 or 7 staff in China at that time as well. And these companies would come to us and they would say like, hey, can you help? But I remember driving to this guy's office in the middle of COVID. The streets are dead. It's in his office in the middle of the city. And you go up to like the top floor of this 50-story building. And it's this most beautiful office you've ever seen. Stunning, but it's completely dead. And you go into this big boardroom that looks over the whole city. And it's one of those boardroom tables that feels like it goes forever. There's maybe 50 seats around it and he's sitting down the other end of the room. So I'm like, all right. So I walk down and I sit next to him. And he was lovely. And he just starts asking me questions like, tell me about your background, tell me about the business, tell me about the mask, blah, blah, blah. I think the conversation goes well. I'm 27 at the time as well. And this guy's in his 40s. So you never know how someone gauges you. I'm wearing a shirt and a blazer to make sure I look the part. But yeah, I got back to the office. And in that time, he transferred us a few $1 million for 5 million masks or something like that. And you know how people say like, well, what was your moment? That was my, like, I went for a walk around the street. I listened to the song, you know, Breeze Blocks by Alt J. And I think I cried for about 2 minutes. And then I got back into the office and I said, all right, we've got to figure out how to deliver this now. Because we did not have a supplier or anything in place. It was just kind of, he said, can you do it? What's your price? And we got in a few quotes and we said, we can do it to this spec at this price. I was able to communicate how we knew enough about the products. And then, yeah, he paid the invoice. And then I said, okay. And then we went on this 2-week mission of sending our teams to different factories throughout the night. And the problem was all the good factories were taken up. The government was funding all these other factories that used to be like a knitting factory to become a mask factory. But there was a lot of cowboys out there as well. And the problem with it is a mask can look like a mask, but the most important part is, does it work? So what's the bacterial filtration efficiency, and then what's the other filtration efficiency? And there were so many masks that came into this country, and this is just one product. It's the same with gowns, everything else, that weren't to spec. And we knew that we couldn't fuck this up because it would just wipe us out completely. So, it's not like we're a Chinese factory that sells it to you, you take it into the country, you can't, there's no recourse. For us, if we got anything wrong, we're an Australian business, they'll come after us. So, we're pretty happy with our performance because we're doing things that no one else did. We had our staff watching the production lines. We had our staff taking stock every few hours from the production lines and taking them to a third-party testing facility to make sure that they were to the spec. And a few months later, after we did it all and it was all done, I swear I've never been more stressed. I did look more like shit my whole life. But he called me, the owner of the business. He goes, "Hey, I just want to let you know we've tested the mask." I thought, fuck. Here we go. And he goes, "Yours tested the best out of any of the masks that we brought into the country."
Amazing.
For us, that was like the money's one side, but that was like the validation of not only did we do it, but we had integrity and we did such a good job of it as well. And that's what set us up to kind of lead on to the next parts of the business.
So incredible. And yeah, I kind of mentioned it before, but again, it sounds like, I don't know, I'd be curious to hear your thoughts, like that idea of, because I think a lot of people, when they kind of put limits on themselves where there might be a customer who says we need X or Y or Z, and they might be like, "Oh, we can't really do that," or maybe we can, but we better figure it out. But it sounds like you're just like willing to kind of jump in and be like, "Yes, I can do that."
Yeah.
And then figure it out on the back end.
Yeah.
Have you always been like that, or is that something you kind of?
Yeah, definitely. In some ways, we did that in the printing business on a much smaller scale. Now I wouldn't do it, as like there's a lot more to risk, right? So yes, we would do it in certain ways, but we'd know how to de-risk it a lot more now than what we used to. But with Sourci, it's 100 clients, 35 staff, maybe more. It's a lot more to risk if you get something wrong.
Yeah, got it. And yeah, something else you mentioned that I'm curious about is even just like the idea of, like opening up another office in another country, in China. I think you have one in India as well.
Yeah.
What's that process like? Because I think there's obviously like regulations and then cultural things. And
yeah,
like,
definitely.
How was that kind of whole experience for you?
That is something that Ellie handled more of than me, but I know that you need someone in the country that you can trust because I know with China, for instance, you need someone who's like a local director. And we're lucky through, again, putting ourselves out there looking for the right people. We met a guy named Jackie who's still with us. He's our China regional manager, and he was able to open up the office, submit all the paperwork. So it's a lot of like, I guess, you need to have someone there and then someone that you can trust. And then you need to obviously follow the process. We use accountants there and external accountants there as well. But I think there's businesses here that offer those services over there as well. But it wasn't the hardest. The hardest part was we never got a chance to go there. Like I still haven't been to our China office in since COVID because now I've got really good production managers, people with the right expertise. I send them because there isn't a lot of value sending me where I don't fully understand I do fully understand, but I'm not the expert in apparel or the expert in accessories where you need those people in the factory leveraging their skill sets as well. So I think it was just surreal to kind of go through that experience, build a team, build an office that we fitted out to look just like our one, but never physically stepped in foot. Ali's been there a few times because he's got ProCon and everything else. And I'm planning a trip to go there as well to show them, one, to build culture and everything else, but to show them our CRM system that we've built and just getting them to understand the process and how things work in Melbourne. I think that needs to come from me as well.
100%. Yeah, super interesting. And yeah, so that's amazing. So then I guess like, so you started Sourci, was it 2017?
Yeah.
That was the year. So, like 5 or 6 years into the business now, I guess we'd love to know just like overall, like, I guess how have you kind of like adjusted your kind of offering or approach, or like what are you doing differently now than you were at the start in terms of offering? Like obviously growth is one thing, but
I think there's two things. One was what I wanted out of the business has changed. I really wanted big team, big growth, big revenue numbers. All that stuff doesn't mean shit. You're better off chasing profit and you're better off having as little headaches as possible. And all those things result in potential headaches as well. Right? I've got a great team, great culture, but it's a lot harder to manage 50 people than it is 5. So I think what I wanted has changed, and I like the size that we are now. I think naturally we're going to grow because everything's working quite well. Mm-hmm. But when you chase those things, it puts the business under a lot of pressure because it's not really organic to the business as well. So that changed. The other part was our product. Two more things. Our offering had changed, so we stopped being kind of like this transparent sourcing agency where we took a fee for service, and we started being like, okay, what do bigger businesses want? The truth is they want you to take the liability. So we used to be like, our value proposition was you can know the supplier, you can know the supply chain, you can even pay them, and we take a fee for service. I think it was 10% of their commercial invoice price. But what would happen was clients would just then start working directly with the factory after the first order, and you cut out. And I understand that as well. But we didn't. That was a way for us to de-risk the business, because if we're the importer, we're liable for the product. But after working with some bigger businesses, you just see that they just want a good price for product. They want to know that you're going to manage it all for them, and they want to, have you to take on the liability and the risk of the product. So then we pivoted the business from that transparency model to like a full service supply chain company where we're supplying products and helping them with the development. The last thing that we did, and that's really been the most game changer, is we figured out what are our niches. And this always freaked me out because I didn't want to be just doing one product category. Right? Because I don't know how big the market is here if you just focus on sunglasses or accessories. And then also you need to build out the expertise for those products as well. But the problem was we were trying to be the jack of all trades and master of none. 1 week we'd be doing toolboxes, the next week we'll be doing skincare, the next week we'll be doing sex toys. There's no cohesiveness in it all. There's no processes you can build. There's no expertise that, one person might become an expert at one of those things, but then they've got to learn a whole new thing the next week. So what we did was we kind of said, okay, well, what would be the categories we want to focus on? And apparel was one, accessories, packaging, and then there's like miscellaneous stuff. But those are pretty much the core competencies of the business now. We used to do beauty, for instance, and last year we just realized it's such a it's such a difficult product to develop because one, it takes a lot longer because there's stability testing, there's a lot more rounds of sample because, for instance, let's say we're making a skincare product, we're making a moisturizer, your feedback's subjective in the sense of you could say to me, it's too oily. But what does that mean? That's not measurable, right? If I make a t-shirt, and you say the arm length is too big, I can say to you, if we reduce by 1.5 centimeters and I show you what that looks like, you can say, yes, that's better. But to do that in skincare, you have to go through so many iterations of samples. And when you tweak one ingredient, it affects another one another way. It was really hard because there's a lot of interest in that category. But once we did the numbers on it all and we saw that very few projects were moving forward or even being profitable, we had to shut it down. So we know that apparel works really well. And one of the reasons why is if you're a scaling apparel brand, you're starting to get a bit of traction, right? But apparel's forever changing. Very rarely does an apparel brand release the exact same product time after time after time. It needs to be new designs, new styles. The problem with that is there's so many moving parts, right? You might need a new factory every time. You might need new designs every time. And for scaling an apparel brand, it's really difficult to have all those resources internally because you might, the salary of a designer is, so a good designer is $100,000. Salary of a good production manager who understands how to construct the garment is $100,000. Salary of a good garment technician is $80,000 or $90,000. And what we did was we hired all those roles and then we kind of share those resources across all our clients. So not only are they getting a good unit price because we can leverage the factories that we work with, then they're also getting all these internal resources that they would not be able to cover the cost themselves. And it means that they can scale the supply chain and their products or develop new products a lot faster. Once that kind of clicked, I was like, okay, well, that's a no-brainer of why people would work with us. There's so much value in what we're offering there. And now we're kind of looking at the other verticals. So for instance, like accessories, we now have an industrial designer. So now we can design the sunglasses, the beauty tools, whatever it might be, and then we can go and 3D print them locally. So the value there is you can go through the product development stage, you can have someone who understands the technical side as well. So where the business is headed now is like building the expertise around the categories that we want to focus on and sharing those expertise and those resources with our clients and letting them leverage and get the most out of it as well as being competitive in setting up the entire supply chain.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And it sounds like natural progression in a way where you start off like super broad, you're kind of everything to everyone.
Yep.
And then you could just see by experience, it's like, oh, okay, like this skincare niche is a bit tougher because of these reasons. So, and these ones work better. So you just gradually kind of narrow down your focus over time.
Yeah.
And it just kind of makes sense. And again, to your point, like makes things more lean, more efficient. You can focus on the things that really count.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just becoming more effective at the end of the day.
Yeah. And I think that's a smart way. Like if you know, whoever's listening, hire consultants, hire contractors, hire agencies, try to put off those internal resources for as long as possible if you can, because unless you know that they're going to work 40 hours a week every week for 52 weeks of the year, you're better off not taking on that burden, that risk of managing staff, probation periods, having to performance manage them. You know, with a contractor, you know, you set the KPIs what you expect. If they don't work, you can find someone else. When it's with staff, you can't just pick and choose and remove people, because one, it's culturally, it doesn't look good. If you have a high staff turnover, it speaks about the business and the culture as well. And we had that. I had to learn that lesson as well.
Yeah. And that leads in really nicely to another point I want to talk about, because I feel like you've mentioned it a few times, and I perceive that you put a lot of thought into around like culture and like values around the company. Yep. And it's something I'm super curious about, because again, it's like, how do you kind of create this ecosystem where, like you mentioned at the start, you know, you have 5 people, they all fit into your spare bedroom, and you can like, it's a pretty cohesive team. But then once you get to 50 people, obviously you don't have direct control over how everything looks, or you kind of have to nurture this culture and environment. So I'd love to just like hear like how you kind of thought about that as the team grew, and how you've like, are there any specific things you've done to really nurture that culture? And
I definitely got it wrong for a long period of time. You know, I hired managers, and then I disappeared into my office, my corner office, and I'd sit there behind a computer, and I thought, this is, you know, I'm a CEO, this is what I do. And it got to a point where I'd walk through the office. I wouldn't even say hi to everyone. I'd just kind of wave and go into my office. I had no relationship for anyone who worked, no real relationships aside my managers with anyone who worked for me. And I didn't realize how much people care about wanting to work with the founder or the owner of the business at the size we are. If you're a 10,000 person company, you know that it's not realistic to kind of have that type of relationship. But I didn't think it would be something that people valued or cared for. I thought people cared about just being paid well, coming in and doing their job and everything else. But I think there's definitely an aspect of, in a small company, being hands-on with the owner and having that input and building those relationships and potentially learning from me as well. So one was I had to kind of, I started you know, naturally kind of fell into having a mentor, and, you know, he just tells me how it is. And he opened my eyes to the fact that the way that I've been operating isn't in the best interest of the business. It might have fed my ego and made me feel important to have managers and all this kind of stuff. But really, it builds a bit of wall between you and what's happening within the business as well. You know, if you really want to find out what's happening in the business, don't talk to your managers, talk to your people on the ground, because they're going to tell you what they really think as well. And obviously talk to your clients, do all that other side as well. But once I kind of realized that it wasn't good to have so many managers and everything else, and I started kind of building those relationships with the team, that's when I realized how important the values of the business are. And, you know, ours are integrity, efficiency, and growth focused. So those are our values that are like the business values, right? So that's what we say to our clients. That's when we do our work. That's when we build our processes. We say it doesn't align to those values. We then have another set of values that are kind of like how we hire and fire people, more or less. You know, open and honest, driven and proactive, and respectful. Those are 3 values that you need to share to be a part of the team as well. And why that's important is it becomes a lot easier when someone, you know, when you feel like someone's not working out within the business, or you don't think that they're living the values, it's so much easier to have a conversation when you can tie it to what the expectation is. But if you don't say that the culture, the values of the company is to be open and respectful, and you find out that someone's been lying to a customer for 6 months, you know, you can't tie it to like, these are the expectations we set. Everyone knows you shouldn't lie. But if you say that I'm so clear that on our values that you are not, you know, that's not acceptable to be lying to customers, then it lets everyone know kind of where we stand. And that was one thing that we were able to build on in terms of, and that kind of builds the culture of the business in some ways. It's not the same as going out to a footy game or doing those events, but it's kind of like, that's the, in the office, or if I'm not there, that's, I hope that that's how people work and treat each other and interact. And that fosters the environment of like everyone being in a team and working together.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And I guess it starts with like first of all, like you said, defining what those values are for the company.
Yep.
But then I guess I'm very curious, like how you approach that in terms of actually trying to think of the right word, like not enforce, but like, you know, a lot of companies will say like, oh, we value X, Y, Z. They have like the teamwork poster on the wall or something, but it doesn't actually mean anything. So I'm curious, like for you, like what's that? How have you managed to actually implement it?
You just make it part of conversations. So let's say someone comes to me with a problem and let's say that there's a problem in their product and that we can kind of push it through or get away with it and the client maybe won't notice. Is that acting with integrity? No. So as soon as you start saying to people, you know, what are our values? What should we do? And they're reflecting on it and they're making decisions based on it. That's how you kind of build it into the culture of the business. So, you know, when there are problems and it's not immediate, I think sometimes, especially now, the team knows how I think and how I see things because I bring it all back to the values. Mm-hmm. So when there is an issue, I say to them, what do you think I'll do? What do you think our values are? And they're kind of answering that question for themselves. And that's the expectation that I want to have within the business is, you know, you're not going to get everything right, but as long as you're trying to live by the values of the business, that's my expectation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, super interesting. And yeah, it's, I guess, like what you said is, you know, you have to actually embody them and live them yourself.
Exactly.
And make sure it's part of everyday conversations and communicate it clearly and people actually understand it. And that kind of like fosters that environment, you could say.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Incredible. And yeah, Gia, it's, there's a few other kind of random topics I would love to kind of get your thoughts on because I heard you talk about another interview. You went on this like Eden health retreat and it seems like you've been prioritizing like your kind of health and wellness.
Yep.
And it's a topic I love because for me personally, like if I think about like personal values we were talking about before, or we were talking about business values, but for me, like personal values, like health and fitness is like something that's very high for me. So I guess like for you, how important is that and how do you kind of balance that with the business and what's that whole journey like been for you?
It's funny because I was meant to go to Europe 4 weeks ago and I couldn't because, you know, business comes first. And I was meant to go to America in 2 weeks because that was meant to be my reward for not going to Europe, but it's not happening either. So, you know, there's definitely rewards in business in terms of, you know, opportunities and freedom and all that other stuff. And sometimes you have them, sometimes you don't. I think one thing that you can't jeopardize though is the importance of, I guess, taking care of yourself. And I know when I'm burnt out, or I know when I'm you know, I've done too much, or because I can feel it within me as well. And I think the business suffers as well when you're not in the best state of mind or you're not feeling your best. But it's also hard as well because, you know, you need to find that balance. And in 5.5 years, I'd say this is the best I've gotten at that at the moment, but it's because I've started to prioritize things. I'll give you a good example of how sometimes you even subconsciously don't know if you are or you aren't. When I went and saw Ellie, my business partner, you know, Ellie, he's living in Bali at the moment. He's there for 6 months. So he wanted to go there because they've just got a little baby. His partner, Steph, they want to take the family. They just want to see what it's like. She does a mum's group, and one of the mums in the mum's group said she was going to go, and then they looked into it, and I said, just do it. Like, what's the worst that can happen? And if you know Ellie, he loves his health, he loves his fitness. He's like, you know, quite muscular, takes care of himself. And we got to Bali, and I went there last month just to catch up with him, and I saw that, you know, getting up, and he was starting work at 7 a.m. there because that's 9 a.m. here. And then I said to him, so when are you going to the gym? He goes, well, I can't because the gym opens at 7 a.m. I said, so you've gone over there for the lifestyle and to enjoy it, and your health is to you one of the most important things, and you're not going in and exercising every morning. He goes, yeah. And I said, so can't you just tell everyone that you start work at 10:30 and you finish at 6:30 and those are your hours now? He goes, yeah, I probably could do that. But, you know, it's like and in some ways you don't even realize that you're doing stuff that's almost detrimental to your health because you're trying to do what's right by the business and you're trying to, so, you know, and once I said to him, I said, no, like, stop. You now work these, like, I didn't tell him, but I said, you know, I want what's best for him as well.
Gave him permission, essentially.
Yeah. Well, I wanted him. I encouraged him to. You know, he does what he wants, and so do I. In that sense, you know, we've always got each other's back. But yeah, he's like, yeah, you're right. And the next week, he just started working those hours, and it's like, you know, sometimes you don't even realize what you're doing to take away from your health and your mental health. And you know, that Eden's a really good example of it because it's a reset. what they teach you in Eden actually used to be Camp Eden, which was a fat camp. And it used to be where they did The Biggest Loser. And then it changed hands. The new owner turned into like a wellness retreat, but they kept some of the same staff and they kept it kind of feeling like it's a wellness camp more than a retreat. And what I mean by that is at 6 a.m. in the morning till 6 p.m. at night, there's activities. So you might do yoga in the morning, then have a break, something to eat. So it goes class, something to eat, class, something to eat. You don't have to do the classes. You can sit by a pool if you want all day, but there's running, then there's yoga, then there's a painting, then there's breath work and everything else. But what they try to get out of it is they know that in 4 days, because you can either do 3 days, 4 days, or 7 days, they know in that week you're not going to become holistic and you're fully healed and you leave there and everything's all good. But they try to teach you the foundations of how to take care of yourself better. So they'll have speakers at night and they'll teach you how to do gratitude or everything else. And I've been twice and I'll pretty much go back every 6 months because it is a good reset and it's a good way to kind of catch yourself and take back some of those good habits. But without it, I think, it would be a lot harder to get in there and give it my all every day without that kind of ability to catch myself and give myself some time to recover.
Yeah, it's so interesting. And it really is one of those things where you feel like you might be taking a step back or taking time away from productive work, but by allowing yourself to actually do that, you're actually able to achieve so much more. You have so much more clarity of thought. You can go harder.
It is exactly that. Because there's no phone, no coffee, no anything like that, you end up journaling for hours and hours and hours. And I try to go there with an intention. And it might be personal or it might be work related. So it might be finding out what I want in life in terms of myself. I was going through a breakup the last time I went there, and it was really good for me because it helped me understand why it was happening, why I felt the way I was, what to do when I got back, because I was kind of on the fence of do we try to get back together, everything else. But it gives you time to really, and journaling's huge as well. When you put pen to paper and it's there, it becomes a lot more real. But it's even helped me with business of the direction I want to take the business in, what will work. That's where we came up with the new pivot into the categories. It kind of led to those things as well. So, I like going there with the intention of I want to get something out of it as well that will help me grow.
Yeah, so interesting. And so what do you want out of life, Gio? If you can share it.
This week? No, I think, and I say this to a lot of people around me, that I know that I'm very lucky. Like I've got beautiful friends, I've got a beautiful home, I can help my family. I like who I am, I like my team, I like, what I get to do every day. What I want now is, I want to continue to build on that. I want to be able to travel more. I think that's the next part of my life, which is I've done 10 years of business. I've never been to Europe. I've been to, on a holiday maybe 3 or 4 times. And it's because I chose those things, right? It's not a sympathy thing. It's like I probably could have gone more, but I didn't have that interest. I wanted to be where I was at the time. And now I want to see the world. I want to travel. I want to grow in those ways as well. But really, I'm just happy to continue with what I have. I don't feel like I'm missing anything, which is really good.
That's great. Yeah, it sounds like super aligned in your work and personal life, and it's just a matter of how do you just keep doing what you're doing and just get better and grow over time.
Exactly.
Which is great.
Yeah.
Cool, Joe. Well, yeah, sort of might look to kind of wrap things up. I'll just go through a few quicker questions, but I guess with Sourci overall, obviously business is doing great. We've talked about it in the journey so far, but what's next for Sourci specifically? How are you thinking about the business?
So we pretty much, the next step is unfortunately, no more startups. We just can't help them. Our resources are so heavily built over here that we need bigger clients because the wages of the team that works on a $40,000 order doesn't cover the cost to develop the product. So we need some really more media clients that we can work with that get the value out of our local team versus maybe if they worked with a sourcing agency where they had an office in China and the overheads are much lower. So where Sourci will change is more or less no more startups. We'll continue to build out the categories of expertise that we have. And we're not trying to expand beyond that. We have recently set up a retail and tender division. So the last 6 months, maybe it's a bit longer now, 8 months, we've had a lovely woman join our team named Irene, and she's helped build our retail division. So she's taken an existing range of products that we have. Because the truth is you come to Sourci, we've sourced thousands of products. And some of them turn into orders for clients, they become their products, and other times nothing will come of them. And she kind of came into the business and said, hey, I think I can take some of what you have, the factories you have, the products you have, and take them to big retailers and get us in there. Mm. And I was really impressed. Within 6 months, she got us into baby bunting, which is fucking huge, for a range of different baby toys, which is really exciting. And we're going to continue to grow that retail space because it's high volume, high order values. We have all the resources there to leverage. And then on the other side, there's the tendering department as well. So we have we've won a few tenders, more or less, but huge supply. Again, it's within our wheelhouse, and one of them was for period underwear. But it's one of those things where it's like, again, we're leveraging the resources, the team, the talent, the factories that we have, and we're going and finding much bigger scale kind of orders for them as well. So continue to build the retail, continue to build the tendering side, and the agency is just kind of growing naturally as well.
Amazing. Yeah, it's really exciting. So we're definitely keep watching the space of what you're doing.
Awesome.
And kind of an idea I like is this idea of like personal development through entrepreneurship, because I feel like to be a great entrepreneur, you need to be constantly working on yourself and developing yourself. So just curious, like from your journey as an entrepreneur and everything you built with Sourci, like what are the kind of like the biggest kind of lessons you've learned about yourself throughout your time so far?
I think personally it's be forgiving. I think one of the things was, you can always be really hard on yourself. I look back and I still think of all the, like, at times I go, fuck, I wish I did that differently, and I'm at where I am and I still think I could have been somewhere else or done better. So, it's being realistic with that as well. I think the other part is like, don't feed the ego. I did that for way too long. I cared about the wrong things. I cared about the way people perceived me within my business, more importantly than how I was within the business. And that's what I said before, where I'd sit there and look at spreadsheets all day and sit in my office, and I thought that was what was being a really good CEO, but it really wasn't. So I think just having that humility and not feeding to the ego and doing things for the right reasons is really important as well.
Got it. Amazing. Great lessons. And what do you do for fun outside of the business?
What do I do for fun? I mean, like I said, the health side's really important to me. I'm lucky where I'm in a position now. I've got some really good friends, and we always have something on, like an event or something fun to go to as well. Besides that, I'm trying to think. I don't know. I love to eat well. I love to enjoy life. I just bought a new car, so I'm enjoying that as well. So
what did you get?
I bought a Corvette Stingray 3 liter.
Cool.
Yeah, so a nice little bit of fun there.
That'd be good fun.
It's loud. So yeah, I'm enjoying driving that around. I do have a few cars actually, so that's probably a little hobby that I have as well. But besides that, I just love good conversation with good people. That's how I fill my days.
Amazing. What's that? I've seen you posted a few times this old school car. What's
that? That's a 1959 TR3A Triumph. So that's like a little go-kart. That's fun. It just breaks down too much. Just costs way too much money to have that car. Just always in the mechanics. So it's a summer car. I think the weather's starting to get better now, so I'll start taking it out. But it's one of those things where it's so beautiful, but horrible to drive because there's no power steering. Like it feels like it's about to break down every 5 seconds. But once it's worked, because I put in the noise cancelling earpods, so I don't actually hear how loud the engine's kind of screaming or struggling. But yeah, it's a beautiful summer car to kind of get around with.
Amazing, man. Yeah, cool. And I guess anything else that I haven't asked you, or just anything you really want to make sure you pass on to the audience before we finish up?
I don't know. What do you think?
I think we've covered a lot. I think, just learning from your journey of everything with Sourci, some of the more personal development side, your health journey. I think these are all like amazing topics. So
I'll say one thing. I don't do any mentorship, and I don't really want to. It's not of interest to me. Not yet, anyway. If there is anyone who's listening who wants to ask questions or pick my brain a little bit, I'm always happy to. If they come to Cremorne, or if they want to jump on a quick Google Meet, whatever it is, I'm always fine to give up 15 minutes, half an hour. So if there is someone who's watching this who found something interesting or wants to know more, I'm happy to kind of give the time.
Appreciate that. It's very generous offer. And I guess what's the best way for people to reach out if they did want to kind of come?
Message me on Instagram. It's the easiest way. I suck at WhatsApp, so but you can reach me on Gio_Pino_.
Awesome. We'll link that up. But Gio, thanks for coming on the show today. I think obviously we've known each other for a little bit now and been sort of watching you in the background with everything with Sourci, and phenomenal what you've done so far, and just the beginning, I think. So thanks for coming on the show, and congrats on all the success so far.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Cheers.